one of the things I want to do is give you guys a bit of an insight into how we manage sales of Podio. So we've been selling Podio to customers for the last 6 years. We've been integrating it from companies, from very small companies up to large enterprise companies. And that has given us a little kind of insight into the best kind of practices around selling Podio and the things to keep in mind. So very quickly in this video, what I want to do is give you some of the benefits of, of our experience. The first thing that you need to keep in mind when you're selling Podio um, is that the flexibility of Podio is key, right? So when I meet a new company, I will often kind of if I'm sitting down and talking to them, I will start kind of finding out about the systems they use at the moment. Now, um, usually, you can either go in and ask them what they're using, but a lot of times I'll kind of pitch it as a sort of hypothetical. We meet a lot of companies where, and I'll start saying, they use this system for this, and they use Salesforce for CRM management, and they use Asana for project management, and they use SurveyMonkey, and they use you know um, a specific tool to do support tickets, Zendesk type tool, and you can often see them kind of go, yeah, that sounds like us. We use a lot of different tools, or if I'm speaking with companies and I know that they probably use Excel to manage things and share Excel, I'll mention that as well. And key to that is that when you're using disparate systems, particularly, I mean, Excel's the worst, but when you're using disparate systems, what you tend to find is that the data doesn't really link as well as you want. So, you can API, you can Zapier or use another product like that, but a lot of the times what happens is that the data doesn't really interact. So there's a lot of manual error, a lot of duplicate work, and a lot of interventions that don't need to happen. When you're using Podio, you can design each of those elements within Podio so that the data smoothly goes across the system and so that the data is linked so that one company can have 50 projects associated to it, can have 400 products, can have different locations and different people and different sales opportunities and lead statuses and updates and phone logs and email logs, but it's all integrated in one system, which means that we can track it and we can report it. That's a fundamental thing to find out. If they're using multiple systems in their business, then that should trigger right away. Oh, let's talk about how this data is linked. Another real kind of key thing that I listen for or that I try and explain is the simple ability to really customize Podio to their individual business. Now, if they're using existing systems, say they're using Salesforce, in fact, to give you two examples. You're either going to be talking to a company who uses no system at all. They use Excel and email. That's A. You're going to be talking to a company that uses an existing system, Salesforce or any number of them, Salesforce and Asana or whatever. That's B. Or you're going to be talking to a more enterprise level company that uses a bespoke or a high level sort of system, an MIS system, which probably has been built for them, maybe being used but using SAP, but often they'll have their own, and that tends to be really very old. So in the first instance where they've got no system at all, then the simple ability to remove error, duplicate work, manual labor, and to ensure that everybody is working off the same data all the time is a huge selling point. If you're talking about B, they're already using existing systems. So critical to this is getting them to understand that when they use another system like Asana or Salesforce, you are having to change the way your business works in order to work within their systems. You can customize Salesforce slightly, but not brilliantly. You can change field names and you can sort of see if this module is available to you or not. You can make some slight changes, but they work how they work. Their process is their process. So you have to fit it. And a lot of companies decide that they need to do that. With Podio, we can completely customize that process. There's nothing there until we build it, which means that we can design and develop a system that's only for them. Now, that's particularly, from a game changing point of view, my company, I think that's one of our greatest strengths because, of course, we've got 12 years of management consultancy experience, which means our ability to analyze a company process, help companies refine their processes is really high, which also means, of course, we can then get them moving towards the best practice process and build Podio accordingly. Um, that's a really fundamental thing to understand. If they're using existing systems, Podio wins because it's completely bespoke. Podio wins because when we build it for them and how they work, and in terms of how they scale. Now, in the third system example, where you've got a more enterprise level company that's using an MIS system, what I find is that these systems tend to be old, they tend to be clunky, they tend not to be cloud based, which is means that there's a huge expense. Same with ShareFile. If you're selling ShareFile right now, you know this. Why do you migrate people to the cloud? Well, because right now they've got massive servers sitting there that have to be maintained. It costs. There's people involved. There's costs involved, and there's capital expenditure involved. With Podio, of course, you have none of that. Same as ShareFile. But the wider issue for enterprise level companies is more about the fact that when you try and make little changes to those systems, I mean, the amount of times I get the IT, you're speaking to an enterprise company, and we were speaking to one just a couple months ago where the IT company is sitting there going, the IT department is sitting there saying, no, can't do that. Because, of course, their systems are built on old technology that is not flexible. Podio is a platform. It's not a system, it's a platform, which can be completely customized. And that is a really great part of this. The other thing to keep in mind when you're talking about enterprise level companies, but even smaller companies, is Podio is also very good at phased implementation. Now, this is particularly relevant when you're talking to enterprise companies because you cannot have disruption, right? If we are integrating a new system into a business, we can't just make them stop for a month and say, well, great, everybody stop, we'll implement this, and then you can start back up a month later. No, you've got to do it within a living, breathing organization. And Podio is brilliant at being able to take one small section, get it working, and then plug in the next and plug in the next. This means that you can design a very, very rigorous phased approach, which phases out the old technology and phases in Podio's capability. And you can do that over years if you need to. This is something that other systems can't do because, of course, other systems, if they decide to migrate a CRM tool, they're going to be migrating this, but then they've got the same problem of data and transference and all of that. With Podio, we can start building one and migrate the next. Another key thing that you need to keep in mind when with Podio, and this is more about Podio and the strength of Podio, is GlobiFlow. Now that Globio is part of Citrix, we're hoping to get even better integration with things like ShareFile. But GlobiFlow is more powerful than any automation system out there that's off the shelf. So if you think about integrators like Zapier or Integromat, they're very good at allowing you to connect lots of different softwares to each other, right? Different software programs. You can do very basic tasks and link them. If a task is created here, create it over here. If a contact is updated here, update it over there. That's fine, and that's brilliant in many ways. But GlobiFlow was built for Podio, which means it's far more integrated and understands the structure of Podio and the structure of the data in Podio, which means we can get data not just one level above, but we can follow the links as far deep into Podio as possible. Now, I'll give you a direct example of that. We are currently working with over 300 Subway stores in London. Subway, the sandwiches. And we've created a bespoke 2-page report which draws information from about 18 different places in Podio automatically, creates very complex charts and tables, which are color coded based on results, and spits out a PDF. That process takes probably a couple minutes for GlobiFlow to crunch the numbers. Um, you can't do that with Zapier. You can't do that with an Integromat. And we can design those reports in a matter of hours. That is a power. And in GlobiFlow is a hugely powerful part of it. Now, I encourage everyone to take a play with GlobiFlow. Um, if you'd like, we can set you up in the demo systems GlobiFlow in a specific workspace where you can play around. Um, but you don't really need to know how to design in it so much as you need to understand the power of being able to get information from any part of your system, whether it's connected or not, and use it in other things. That's something that Podio is almost unique in being able to do, and it's something you really need to understand. Now, when I go about selling Podio, the other thing that I really concentrate on a couple key benefits, um, and I listen out as I've just said to you for those sort of cues, Excel, multiple applications that they're using for across their business. Um, but the other thing that I think is really important to remember when you're selling Podio is is simply, and I alluded to earlier, is simply the fact that as a completely cloud-based solution, you are going to be transferring an awful lot of the load to Citrix. So Citrix has to manage the servers. Citrix has to manage GlobiFlow. Citrix has to manage the data security. And that is actually a really, really great thing when you're migrating someone who's using Excel, when you're migrating someone who's using an older MIS system that's built on a server that they control, is the simple fact that Citrix has to do the heavy lifting. Um, so what I wanted to just kind of get across in this video is just sort of the key things that we find when selling Podio. And just to reiterate, that customization, that complete flexibility to build across all different parts of the system and link it together, and that ability to grab and manipulate data from anywhere in the system are absolutely key things that Podio can do that no other system can do. So think about whether you're talking about a small business, a medium, or large. Thinking about find out whether you're talking to a business that has no system, a bunch of systems, or a real powerful MIS kind of more enterprise level system, and start to clue in the trigger points in your own memory and your own mind, so that if they're talking about this, you can go straight to, well, if you're using an enterprise system, here's why ours is better. If you're using multiple systems, here's why using one is better. And I hope that helps. If you have any questions, just drop me a line in Podio.